Yeah, hello everybody. I welcome you back for the second chapter of Basics of Business Administration with a very strong focus on basics, more basics of basics. So today I promised you to talk about the legal forms of enterprises. I told you already last time among the basic decisions which an enterprise has to take, there is one important decision which is in which legal form are we going to act? And this is what we are going to speak about in this small little chapter. Now perhaps you want to have some literature recommendations, so I just plundered Amazon and my personal library in order to get some suggestions for you. Here they are. For example, there is one nice work by Wirt Arnold and some others, Corporate Law in Germany, an introduction which has already seen several editions. Not quite cheap, so only use it in a library, or if you have rich parents, you can use the opportunity to make them poorer. You will not necessarily need it, but when you come across it in a library, you can train your English with it. The same principle, again, an overview about the law of business organizations, so corporate law, in English language, written by two German experts here. That might be available. A more general perspective you can get from Luca Serioni's EU Corporate Law and EU Company Tax Law. It's not quite perfectly up to date because it's already 10 years old or so, but that's still okay and can give you some basic insights into corporate law. So here is an overview about corporate law written by somebody in the UK, I think. So has seen 4 editions, medium price level, might be okay if you want to introduce yourself to English law. Another introduction to German law in general, so there will be also something apart from corporation law. Here the same, a general introduction to German law where you can get some basic knowledge about German law in general. And here's something for the people interested in the law in the US. There's, for example, this nice thing to see here. Yeah, and here is something, an introduction to American law and the American legal system. Then also recommendable are always, or nearly always, the books in the In a Nutshell series from the USA. The law of corporations for people who want to inform themselves about the law there. Also from that perspective we have here something on contracts, and here something on the international agreements between states, how the sales contract law should be designed, at least in international cases. Also this might be recommendable. Furthermore, you can use as additional sources, for example, the official website of the European Union. That would be www.europa.eu, and there you would then be confronted with the official website, and under the entry EU law you can be led on to further explanations or sketches of the existing legislation. Here you can choose what you want to know, and especially summaries of EU legislation where in short words you get explained what are the main important rules. You could find that here, and if you select enterprises there, you would be ending up in the end with something about businesses in the internal market, where you could get some comprehensive information. No, not a comprehensive information, but an introductory information on company law in the European Union too. Okay, let's just now turn to the contents of today. And you probably remember from the last chapter that when you want to become richer, so to generate income, you must get that additional property somewhere, so from others, from contacts with others. And now, if you don't intend to rob them, there is only one way to get more, that is by agreements with the others. So you must know about how to make contracts with them. So contracts are necessary, and now contracts, and apart from that, getting richer also create income. That is only possible for persons who can have rights and take obligations, because a contract is always an agreement between two people, and usually it means that one of them takes an obligation. I am going to do this, and you are going to do this for me in return. So a contract requires an agreement between persons. And a contract can only be enforced against persons. You can never start a lawsuit against a thing. I want to oblige this desk to be nice to me or to function properly. No chance. No judge can ever give you a right against a thing. I oblige this car to function. How should that work? So contracts necessitate people interacting with each other, persons. So that's the big problem here. So we must first think about what are contracts, how can they be made. So an enterprise itself is usually an entity which consists of many things called assets, your property. They are organized in a way that they can produce other things. So machines, for example, can produce cars. But when you want to look to the legal backgrounds, the factory itself cannot make contracts with the outside world. So there must be a person behind it, an owner who can function as a person who makes a contract, an owner who owns the factory. Thing cannot be owned by itself. Everything must have an owner, at least in the real world. So the whole thing will not work without a person standing behind it or without an owner. Good. So the owner is the person who can then say, I own that raw material, I produce a car from it, I sell the finished car to my customers by a contract, and therefore the customers will take the car and will take the obligation to pay for the car, in return a nice amount which is higher than the enterprise's costs, and so the owner makes a profit from that contract and the customer is happy to have bought the car. Now, when you come to real life situations, very often it is not possible that, let's say, the owner of Volkswagen or the owner of BMW enters into a contract with every individual customer or every individual trader who acts as a retailer for these cars. So you need a way out. And the law is very simple on that. If the owner wants to make a contract, it is not necessary that the owner acts in person himself or herself. For example, the most simple way is a contract, so to enter into an agreement with somebody else. So I declare I'm willing to make an offer, and somebody else says, yes, I accept your offer and the conditions under which you pose it. So we make an agreement which establishes rights and obligations which we voluntarily agree to and then are bound by them. Now, the owner is not needed to speak in person with the other person. You can, for example, send letters, faxes, emails. So then we would still think it's not the letter who speaks, but it's still person X who speaks and makes the offer. So it's not the fax machine, the fax device, it's still X who makes the contract. If you call by telephone, it's not the telephone which makes the offer, it's still X who uses the telephone. And now, so the device by which you make the message is not a part of the contract, it's just a means of communication. Now, naturally, it can make no difference if you don't use a fax machine or a piece of paper, but send another person with a message. So if that person just repeats what you ordered them to say, this is not the offer made by that messenger, it's the offer made by you. There's no difference between a telephone and a telephone with 2 legs and 2 arms. So a person which you send away and say, tell them what I offer and ask them if they agree, and if they agree, you are the messenger who carries back their yes to me, and then we have two declarations of intention which overlap, and then we have a contract. Both agree to the same things, to the same rights and obligations fixed under that agreement, and now you have a contract. Now, so a person whom you send as a messenger does not enter into the contract. That messenger is just a device like a telephone or a piece of paper covered with a letter and so on. So that person speaking for you is out of the contract. Yeah? That person is just your messenger. So what does that mean? Well, you can send a person to and fro, always to somebody and back, and so make a negotiation. Now you can even go further. For example, you might even say, just to make things less complicated, to a person, you are my messenger, go to Mr. Smith in Cologne and tell him of an offer of mine. I offer you to buy a car if you are willing to pay a price of 20,000. If customer agrees, then we have a contract between me and the customer. Now, if the customer does not agree, you will come back, you should come back and then ask me, customer is only willing to pay 18,000. Then I say, try to get a better price, my offer is 19,000. And so the messenger would always have to travel to the customer and back, and now you could make things more simple. If you think the messenger is a bit intelligent, then you would just say, well, go there, make my offer, and say 20,000 is the price for a new car which you can buy from me. And now if the customer is not willing to accept that price, then you can vary the offer and go down with the price. Then just say 19,000 as the next thing, or just say something which sounds intelligent and reasonable enough for you. I just allow you to go down with the price as far as you think it is necessary. I could still live with the price of 15,000. Below you cannot go. Then your messenger is still nothing else than your messenger. Okay, now it's a kind of an intelligent machine, yeah? A computer with 2 legs and 2 arms. You programmed that person to formulate your wishes. Instead of that, you always expressively state or change your price. You just told your messenger, behave in an intelligent way, negotiate cleverly, go down with the price if you think that's necessary, and what you say, that's still said by me, because you follow my wishes, and according to the situation you vary the price. That doesn't change anything. Like an intelligent computer, the computer would not have an own will, the computer would not enter into a contract, the computer just does according to a program what it has been told to do so, and your messenger does the same. You send that person to Cologne, make an offer to a customer, you can buy a car for 20,000. If that is not acceptable for the customer, go down with the price until you think you can reach a reasonable agreement. Then it's still not that person which speaks and enters into the contract as one of the parties. It is still you who are making that offer. So, such a person is just a device, a kind of device, speaking for you, and that is called a representative. Under the law, that person just speaks in your name, or also one could say on your behalf, according to your wishes, with your permission. That person makes statements which come from you, which are authorized from you, and so the representative never enters into the contract. He or she is not one of the contracting parties, not one of the partners of the contract, but just somebody who speaks for somebody else, is not liable for or responsible for the things which happen. Only the two people speaking with each other, so I, who sent that representative, and you as a customer, we are the contract partners and we take rights and obligations. The messenger, the representative, is out. It's just a kind of technical machine with a brain who speaks for me. So a representative under the law just acts for the person in whose name that representative speaks. And that is the very simple concept which makes it possible that the owner of a factory can, for example, make contracts with hundreds of thousands of customers without getting mad. You just give the power to act as your representative, that is called in English the power of attorney. You give that power to somebody of your employees or to somebody else and say, you get permission to speak in that affair in my name according to orders which I give you, a range of discretion I give to you. Decide intelligently when you come into a certain situation how then you act for me. You can give them a wide possibility to decide to adjust your offers according to the situation, or you can give them a very narrow scope or discretion, or only no scope of discretion. Go there, make an offer of 20,000, and if they refuse, come back. Possible. That just depends on the wishes of the person who appoints that representative. So the trick is just that you send somebody who speaks for you, and you can do this with many people, so you can multiply your capacities to act. Now, naturally, for the customer, that seems to be a problem. For example, if Mr. Smith knocks on a door in Cologne and makes an offer, you can buy a car for 20,000. How can the customer now know who is the contracting partner? If it's Mr. Smith who knocks on the door and stands there in person, or if it is me, Mr. Dotzenbeck from Kleve? And the answer is, well, the solution is plain and simple. If you act as a representative for somebody, you are usually bound or expected to disclose that fact. If somebody makes an offer to me and I accept that offer, I can reasonably suppose, normally, under normal circumstances, that this person is my contract partner, so that I can enforce my claims, if anything goes wrong, against this person who speaks to me. If that person doesn't want that, that person will disclose in a way which is clear enough to me that this person only speaks for somebody else. So if Mr. Smith knocking on the door in Cologne and making an offer to a customer does not want to be bound by the contract, Mr. Smith just says, hello, Mr. Müller, here I am, Mr. Dotzenberg sends me, and Mr. Dotzenberg wants to make an offer for you. You can buy a car from Mr. Dotzenberg for a price of 20,000. So it must be explicitly made clear or made clear by the circumstances that the person speaking only acts as a representative for some other person, which must be revealed, whose identity must be revealed to the customer or other contracting partner. That's sheer logic, because if you don't know with whom you make a contract, you cannot enforce your rights in court by a lawsuit if you don't know against whom you have a claim. That is the reason why, if somebody does not disclose that he or she only acts as a representative, at least the contracting partner has claims then against this acting person. And if later the representative says, surprise, I did not act for myself, I acted for Scrooge McDuck, for example, then if that was disclosed later, you can choose if you accept this, or if you say, at least under German law that's the case, or if you say, no, you acted, you appear to act for yourself only, so you are my contract partner, and any claim that I have, I direct against you, and you have to feel yourself responsible that every of my rights, my claims which I have against you will be fulfilled. Any obligation which has the other side of the contract will be legally yours from my perspective, because you appeared as if you acted on your own. So there might be some tricks, but the basic principle should be clear. Somebody who just speaks for somebody else is not a part of the contract, has no liabilities, no obligations, no rights from the contract, but is just like a telephone on two legs, is just speaking for the person who sent him, who gave him that power of attorney to negotiate or so. And that is effective always if that is disclosed to the other party. Then the other party can never address or make liable the representative. For example, if you buy a car in a car trader's shop, you will probably not buy it from the owner of the shop. You will do all the negotiations with an employee of the car trader. Nevertheless, from the circumstances, it is clear that the employees in the car trader's shop act for the owner. So the employee there doesn't need to officially disclose to you that I am only an employee and act for my boss. That's clear from the circumstances. So it's clear when you sign the contract over the purchase of the car that there you will find the name of the boss. And even if the contract would only be made orally, then it would be clear from the circumstances your contract partner was not the employee but the boss, because it's clear that employees act as representative for their bosses if their bosses gave them the right to negotiate. Yeah, so this is the explanation why you can make many purchases in real life from the owners of a shop without ever having seen that shop owner. Important is, when you have contracts, all your claims are only against the other party of the contract, so the representative is fully out of the matter and is not liable for anything which goes wrong. Was only a kind of a messaging device, that person, so has nothing to do with the contract, and that's relatively clear. So to put it plain and simple, if the postman sends you a letter with the contents which you don't like, then you can't direct your anger to the postman. You must go to the person who spoke to you, and the same is with contracts. So you give that person the power of attorney and then it's you who speak there. As we have the underlying problem nearly everywhere in the world, a human being is not able to negotiate 1,000 contracts a day or so with thousands of customers. We will have that problem everywhere in the world, and so we will have the similar solution everywhere in the world, that nearly every civil law will know that you can give the power of attorney for somebody for certain purposes. It depends usually. There might be some things where civil law nowadays forbids to act as a representative for somebody else. So the details might be different. For example, in the Middle Ages and in the Renaissance, 16th century, so later, 16th or 17th century, it was even possible for a head of state to give the power of attorney to an ambassador, even for marrying the future wife. So if Louis XIV of France married a Spanish princess, then usually the marriage was concluded in the Spanish church and the bride was there, and then the yes of the husband was pronounced by the French ambassador to Spain as representative of his king. This would not be quite correct under today's view, but you see for which purposes a law allows power of attorney. That depends. By the way, in criminal law, it also wouldn't work. For example, if you send somebody and say, I now give you the order, kill somebody, and that person then says, in the name and on behalf of Mr. Müller, I kill you. That person would naturally be involved in the criminal act. So for criminal activities, the system doesn't work. We don't tolerate that. So the person acting there would be a criminal, clear. But for civil rights things, for contracts, power of attorney, and the construction that somebody is only a representative for somebody else, that works. So there the representative legally doesn't exist. It is the person who appointed the representative who is legally acting and speaking. So important terms which you necessarily must know is the term representative, then that the representative acts in the name of, or also possible to say on behalf of, the person who gave the orders. So if Mr. Müller is representative of Mr. Smith, then it is Mr. Smith who legally speaks. And naturally you should know what a power of attorney is. Now, with whom can you make a contract? There are basic alternatives. First, you can conclude a contract with one person alone, who owns the enterprise. It could be that several persons act together, so that I am confronted with three persons who together own a house, and I can make a contract with all the three together. I say I offer to pay a price for the house, and the three say we three together take the obligation to convey ownership of that house to you, the seller. In that case, very often, if you have such a multitude of persons, it is very often frequent that one or two of these persons get the power of attorney to speak for all these persons together. So if you have a house where three brothers and sisters own the house together, the negotiations will often be made by one of the owners in the name of all the others, so that would work. And there is also another strange construction, which we will later explain, the so-called juridical person, or also called legal person. So here are the possibilities. Single person, natural person called in Germany, or several persons acting together, so-called partnership, or a juridical person or a legal person. Now let's look a bit closer to that. If one person owns the enterprise alone, that's the most plain and simple solution. I myself, for example, buy a piece of land, I order a construction firm to erect a factory building, I buy thousands of machines, I give power of attorney to several people to buy raw materials, I employ, so sign some employment contracts, or I appoint a representative with the task to look for adequate employees and employ them in my name. So in the end, the piece of land is owned by me. All the raw materials are bought by me, all the finished products are sold by me, everything's done by me. So yeah, that's very plain and simple. Which requirements do I have to fulfill in order to be able to do this? Well, I need to be a human being, and I should be able to read and write, although that's not necessary. I should not be mentally ill. There are some constellations where under civil law somebody is regarded as not fully able to make contracts. But all others have the possibility to make contracts, either by themselves or by a representative. Could even a child buy a factory building? And the answer is yes. Now, a child is usually not able to form opinions on what is good and bad economically. And a 1-year-old child couldn't even state its will, can't speak. That's only on the first glance true. A child can speak legally because a child has parents or others as legal representatives. Under the law, until you are grown up and can speak for yourself, your parents can speak for you in all legal matters. They have, by law, the power to represent you. So, if, for example, you inherited from somebody some 10 million, somebody will have to administer these 10 million in your name and can do with that property, with that amount of money, what is deemed to be adequate. For example, could invest that in your name. And then you, the child of 1 year, represented by a legal representative, go to a notary and buy a piece of land there in order to erect a factory building there. By the way, it's not so easy as it sounds, because a representative must always keep the limits of the power of attorneys and must justify himself or herself later for the way how that capacity to act as a representative has been used. So you are not allowed to, internally, you are not allowed to use your power of attorney in a way that is detrimental, which does damages to the person for whom you act. So you have to justify yourself. So parents representing their children are usually restricted in the affairs in which they can act for their children. That depends or differs depending on the local law. Good. But if I'm grown up, there will be no legal restrictions to the contract in which I can enter. The only condition will be that I probably am able to fulfill them. Otherwise, it might be a fraudulent behavior, might be criminal to promise things to others without the ability to keep them. But in principle, there are no great conditions which you have to fulfill. Everybody can make contracts if he or she thinks it adequate to do so. So a single person acting as an entrepreneur, as the owner of an enterprise, simply does not require any conditions legally, and that person acts for himself or herself. In order to denominate this with a nice word, one usually speaks of a sole trader or a sole proprietor or sole owner. That just signalizes that you alone, without any other legal construction, are the owner of that enterprise which is run. So sole trader, sole proprietor, sole owner are all synonyms for all the same thing. So a natural person who just acts on his or her own behalf. Good. So all contracts are made by the owner legally. The owner has all duties and responsibilities. Everything which the enterprise consists of is owned by that single person. Every profit which is made is owned by that single person. All debts and liabilities are taken in the name, that means by that single person. So everywhere that person is in play, directly involved into every contract which the enterprise makes. So if something goes wrong, then naturally this person is responsible for fulfillment of all the contracts. The advantage might be if I am the person who makes all the contracts, then a contract can only be established by your free agreement. So I can personally decide on all the things which I want to accept or not. So in case of a sole proprietorship, the owner is the one and only person who has the right to decide everything. Nobody interferes with that. Naturally, if I give the power of attorney to a representative, that representative can also make some decisions, but legally that's still my decision, and I can decide to whom I give the power of attorney or not. So every important decision can be mine, and as I always can limit or revoke a power of attorney, indeed, the right to decide can never be taken from me. Good. Sometimes when you have to do with other people, there might be some protective legal restraints in how you can deal with people, so that the freedom to design a contract is limited a bit. And very often that is the case with employment contracts, because economically an employee is weaker, has less power to insist in his or to protect his or her own interests. So very often the law sets minimum rights which a contract must grant to the people, and for example very often the employment conditions are regulated by certain legal frameworks. So for example in Germany and many other countries we have some rules on the co-determination of workers. Co-decision, what I wrote down here on the slide, is not a very frequent expression. Usually the technical term is co-determination, sorry. They can decide or co-determine, take part in the decisions which the enterprise owner makes with regard to how life in an enterprise, in a firm, is organized in certain ways. But in all other cases, the basic principle is the owner decides everything. Yeah. Then naturally the owner has also to face all what can go wrong, all the negative aspects. It will be the owner who has the profit, and so the owner will have to pay the taxes for the profit. It is his profit or her profit. So who has a profit has to pay the taxes. So income tax will be due. Income tax in Germany, for example, goes up to 45%. That's not a small amount. In other states might be comparable. All rules which exist and say what you have to observe when you run an enterprise have to be kept by that person, by the owner. For example, laws for environmental protection. If they are violated by you. The duty to provide a balance sheet once a year and to have a proper accounting has to be fulfilled by you, because you are the owner, by that one single person. Okay. Yeah, and are there different kinds of sole traders? And the answer is no. The legal form of the natural person is always the same. There is no legal distinction between different human beings. So the names might be different, sole proprietor, sole trader, it's all legally the same. It's an existing human being who makes contracts and stands behind the enterprise. Now, the other alternative, the next alternative, how one can organize ownership of an enterprise would be several persons who want to act together. So they form a so-called partnership, because a partnership is if several, more than one person, unite and agree to follow together a common purpose. That is called a partnership. Now, if the aim of our partnership were that we want to run a factory together, then we would form a partnership contract, an agreement which says we, A, B, and C, want to run an enterprise together, and everything which is combined with that enterprise will be done by us together. So we buy a factory building together, so that factory building belongs now to A, B, and C together. We employ people together, so the contract which Mr. Miller as an employee makes with us is made with A, B, and C, the three owners of the enterprise, acting together. And the cars which the factory produces will later be owned, when they are finished, by A, B, and C together, and will be sold by A, B, and C together to a single customer. So all the profit and so is owned by this owner together, these owners together. So you have then always, let's say, these three persons on one side of the contract. They enter into a contract together. That means, as you know, in a contract, every side, every partner in a contract takes rights and liabilities, rights and obligations. And all the obligations in which the firm is involved will then be, on the one side, taken up by A, B, and C together. So that if anything goes wrong, I can make A, B, and C responsible for the fulfillment of the contract. You know, when somebody promises me, if I give them 20,000, they owe me a car. Then if I fulfill my side of the contract, they have to deliver that car. And if that car doesn't work properly, I can complain to A, B, and C and force A, B, and C to do what they have promised, to fulfill their obligation and deliver a functioning new car as it has been specified in the contract. So all the rights and obligations then are then taken by the three people together. So the property bought together belongs to all the three partners together. The partners must agree, for example, upon the rules, how, under which conditions, and how they deal with that property, how they will handle it, and so on. There are several basic forms of partnership contracts where you have standardized rules which the law offers you. You can choose them or you can modify them. And these rules then remain in force until you modify them. Frequent partnerships must be known to you. So the partnership rules which are most frequent in business are some forms which were invented in Italy, I believe, in the Renaissance area, approximately 1400 or 1500. You can already find them there, and they have spread throughout Europe at least, and I think also the US or even the world. So the first form of partnership is the simple partnership. In Germany, it's called the simple partnership under the Civil Code, or the GBR, the Gesellschaft bürgerlichen Rechts. Bürgerliches Recht is the German term for civil law. So the most basic form is that the most general form. The definition is a partnership can be concluded for every possible purpose. So a partnership is there defined in a general way, that a partnership is every agreement where several persons unite with the intention to follow a certain aim together. That aim can be everything in principle. And then there are standardized rules which partner is responsible for which obligations of the partnership, or in how far all the partners are liable for all the obligations together, and so on. Now, when you, or if you intend to form a partnership with the aim to run a major enterprise, then automatically the simple form of partnership is out, and that special form of partnership which you then founded is automatically classified as a so-called general partnership, or in German offene Handelsgesellschaft, so trading partnership, for trade which is open for all claims of the contract partners. Condition is that you intend to run a trade activity or a similar activity, and that the trade is just not of absolute minor importance. So then your partnership will be classified as a trade partnership of eine Handelsgesellschaft, or as it would be called in English, general partnership. The effect is that every partner in that partnership has the right to act as representative for all the other partners, so for the partnership in full. So if you have an OHG between A, B, and C, three partners, then A can sell the factory building alone in the name of the OHG, because it's generally assumed that every partner has the full power of attorney for the whole partnership. So you must be very cautious in the selection, whom you choose as your partner in such an OHG. If A, B, and C form a partnership and A is some very, very ignorant idiot, then A can ruin the others just by entering into contract obligations which are very, very bad for the partnership, and so that affects also the right of B and C. So, and as all the partners are bound by every agreement made by the OHG or in the name of the OHG, every contract partner can address any claim to each of the partners and make them pay in full for such an obligation. So each partner is regarded as contract partner and can be fully made liable for the fulfillment of every contract of that OHG. So that can be a very, very inconvenient position if you are a partner in OHG and one of your partners goes mad and begins to make contracts which you don't like, because that contract is also made by you in your name, and you can be held fully responsible for the fulfillment of that obligation which was made in your name automatically. Naturally, such a dangerous partnership, there must be some legal certainty, and so if people have an OHG, that must be registered in an official register, the commercial register. But as long as you are not registered, that does not mean automatically that then you are not an OHG. But the public just has an interest in getting possibility to confirm and check if somebody like Mr. A, who says, I act in the name of an OHG and I act for all my partners, if that can really be true, if that OHG really exists. As that OHG has the status of a merchant, there are some special legal rules applicable. Among others, an OHG has to make a balance sheet regularly, must have a proper bookkeeping and proper accounting. And when an OHG enters into a contract, it is automatically assumed this is an organization by full professionals. They know about all the tricks and pitfalls of the law. So laws to protect consumers against mistakes or unfair contract clauses automatically do not apply to an OHG as a contract partner, because they are a merchant and are regarded as people having full professional knowledge. So again, that is a bit dangerous. Another standardized form of partnership in Germany would be the KG, called Kommanditgesellschaft. In English, that would be called a limited partnership. This is also a partnership, but the peculiarity is that beside at least one fully responsible partner who takes full responsibility for all contract obligations of the KG, there is another class of partners called the limited partners. They only give money to the KG, but they are not bound directly by the contract obligations which are made by the KG. So you must at least have one person who is fully responsible under a contract, otherwise a contract would make no sense. But some of the partners can have a limited partner status. So if I make a contract with the AKG and the AKG has A as full partner and B and C as limited partners, the only person whom I can hold responsible for the full fulfillment of the contract obligations is A, the full partner. If there are two full partners, A and B, I can make all the full partners responsible according to whatever I like. And the limited partners, let's imagine C and D, are out. I cannot address any claims to them directly. I can only address the KG, and if the KG has common property, I can address the full property of that KG. The KG must fulfill the contract, or additionally, I could ask A and B personally, but not the limited partners C and D. That might be attractive, because if something goes wrong, well, the firm can lose everything it has, the KG. A and B can lose everything they have, because I can address them directly and make them responsible to pay for any obligation the KG has entered into, but I cannot address C and D directly. So it would be highly attractive to be the limited partner, and indeed people like to be limited partners in KG naturally, because there You have a part in the profit if it's running well, but the maximum risk is you can only lose your invested capital, but contract partners of the KG cannot address you personally, so you cannot suffer additional losses. Good. Other standardized forms of partnership in Germany would be a professional partnership called a Partnerschaftsgesellschaft, is reserved for the partnerships where the aim is to run a so-called free profession, that is lawyers, notaries, tax advisors, and other special professions which have a special status under the law and are not traders or producers of a classical. It might also be formed a professional partnership with limited liability. That's a kind of a parallel to the KG in the area of trade. Or sometimes with lawyers or other free professions, you also find the word Sozietät, that is nothing else than a simple partnership under BGB, so under the Civil Code, in case of, or with the aim to run a free profession. So that's not a special legal form of a partnership, but rather the basic form. Now, next and last alternative, which in principle exists, that is a juridical person. Now, what's the basic idea behind that? We had already one person acts, we had several persons act together, and now the next alternative, a person acts who does not really exist. An invented person. The basic idea is that naturally when people run a business, if everything goes right, you will always be lucky to have a business. But if things go wrong, if you make losses, if you sign a contract which you can't fulfill, if you produce a product which explodes and causes damages, you are responsible as the contract partner, and so you might lose an enormous amount of money. That's a big risk. You want to get rid of that. Now you could form a limited partnership where you are the limited partner, but then the full partner still has the risk, and you probably find nobody who wants to become the full partner if there is a huge risk combined with the whole affair. And so some centuries back in history, a special invention was made. Certain organizations got a privilege that no partner could ever be addressed personally for the contract obligations of that organization. And later, the legal theory formed the idea that such an organization just had the full rights of a person. So law just treats that organization as if it were a person. So that is why it's called a juridical person or a legal person. Its existence is just due to legal rules. Whereas a natural person, a human being, exists by nature, and in nature, a juridical person exists just in the area of law. Now, you must see that basic idea clearly. Some entity, organization or so, is by law just treated as if it were a human being, as if it were an independent person. Now, how can such a person who does not really exist act? And the answer is that's plain and simple. Like a child of 2 years can act. You just give that fictitious person a legal representative. So if you have a stock corporation that is a juridical person, there will be a managing director, and that managing director has under the law the power to speak for that stock corporation in its name. So the managing director, if he or she says to you, do you want to become an employee of our stock corporation, then he's just a representative of the stock corporation. You sign a contract with that corporation. So You are the employee of a person which in reality does not really exist. Nevertheless, under the law, we have to do as if that corporation is your employer, as if it were a person. So then, from whom can you only claim your salary, your monthly wage? Not from the managing director. He was only the messenger, only the representative. Only you can address all your claims against that legal person, so against the stock corporation. Now, how can a stock corporation, such a juridical person, have property? Well, if it can make contracts, it can buy a piece of land, it can open a bank account, it can make contracts, it can make profitable contracts. So it can become richer and richer, and so it can own property, and if it can own property, there can be money from which you can demand to be paid month by month. So that is how it works. The trick now is whenever something goes wrong, for example, the business fails, now at the end of the month nobody pays your wage. It surprises you a bit. You knock on the door of the managing director and say, my wage has not been paid, and the managing director says, yeah, then you should try to go to court and start a lawsuit, or try to get somebody from the court who confiscates the property of your contract owner, your contract partner, so that this serves as a kind of payment. But one thing is clear, you cannot go into the rooms where the managing director lives in his private home and confiscate his property or take money from his bank account and force him to pay. Why? Because that managing director was not a part of your contract. He just acted as representative for the stock corporation. So the only thing you can do is you can look for property owned by, under the law, by that stock corporation, and you can take that property or can cause the court to confiscate it and then hand it over to you in order to enforce your rights under the contract. But the person who made the negotiations with you and the person who always gave you commands, the managing director, is completely out of the contract relationship. That is nice. That shields that managing director against every criticism and against any risks. The duties and liabilities are not those of the people who founded the enterprise, but only the stock corporation. Yeah. So the trick is that here you have a maximum of non-responsibility of the persons who decided to start an enterprise. Now, naturally, as this is a very, very interesting trick, we must decide who can really say that something has to be seen as a person. And the answer is, such a nonsense, the idea can only be enforced by law. I can, for example, not say, I now decide that there is a juridical person called AAA, and everybody now enters. I act now for that, disclose that to others. So I just said, I invented a juridical person. That's not possible. There must be clarity, things must be clear, and people cannot do what they want. Only the legislator, only the law can force us to accept generally for law purposes such a strange idea. So only the law can decide if a certain kind of entity, an organization or the like, must be treated and seen as an independent person under the law. So only law can create legal persons. Naturally, the law is different in every country of the world. So in every country of the world, you have different names for legal persons, although very often similar constructions show up. And there is no possibility to decide on your own what is a legal person or not. What is a partnership where all the partners act together and become contract partners, and what is not a partnership but a juridical person. You can only learn that by heart. So whenever you come across the name of a legal form for an enterprise, you must know if that is the name for a sole proprietorship, if that is a name for a partnership, or if that is a name for a juridical person. You have no other possibility than learning that by heart, memorizing what is a juridical person and what is not. Good. For this reason, short overview about the most frequent juridical persons in Germany. For example, the most important one is the so-called Aktiengesellschaft, AG. You can establish it for every legal purpose, but when you establish an AG, it must get a minimum property at the beginning, at its foundation. So the founders, so-called shareholders, must give it 50,000 euro for a start, and then it must be registered in the commercial register, and it only starts to live after registration has been made and confirmed by the authorities. The existence of that AG ends, so it dies when it is removed from the register, when registration is cancelled. It will need representative to act, because a fictitious person can have no brain, so it gets managing directors. Accounting is mandatory. Balance sheet and profit and loss statement must be made and must be disclosed to the public regularly. And now you have a big problem. What if everything goes right, goes well, and that, for example, car factory owned by that AG generates profits over profits? Then the founders have a big problem. It's not their money. Under the law, these millions of profit belong to that fictitious person. Now, it's not a nice feeling to have had the idea for a business, founded a juridical person, and then that juridical person swims in money, but it's not your money, and you can't touch it because nobody is allowed to take any other person's money. Now, fortunately, under the standard regulations for an Aktiengesellschaft, there is a rule that an Aktiengesellschaft has the right to distribute its profits, so the increase of its property after it has been founded, to its shareholders. So it's legally possible that once in a year, after the end of a so-called accounting year, the AG finds out how much profit it has made, and then on the vote of an assembly of all the shareholders, it can decide to distribute the profit completely or a part of the profit to the shareholders, and that is what makes the thing attractive. Because if there is no profit but losses cannot be distributed, then that's just bad luck for the Aktiengesellschaft. But if there are profits, they can be distributed, and that is what makes the foundation of an Aktiengesellschaft attractive. Yeah, but the most important legal form, and here you all should really listen carefully, is in Germany the Gesellschaft mit beschränkter Haftung, so the limited company or the private limited company can be founded by everyone, even by a single person. The amount which is required to establish one is 25,000 euro at least or more. That can be fixed by the founders in the statutes, so in the rules which which govern the behavior and the purpose of that institution. As an Aktiengesellschaft, the juridical person, by the way, that is true for all juridical persons under German law, it starts to live when it is registered in the commercial register, and it dies when it is removed from the register. It must have representatives, that will be again the managing directors. Accounting and bookkeeping is mandatory. Balance sheet and profit and loss statement must be published each year, and again, it can distribute its profit as dividends to the shareholders. An alternative, a simplified form of the GmbH is the so-called UG, Unternehmergesellschaft. That is a relatively new variant of the GmbH with the particularity that the minimum starting capital is only €1. Then it can be and must be increased over time until it reaches the full amount of €25,000. From then onwards, it can be transformed into a regular GmbH, and only then all the profits can be distributed until the minimum capital of a GmbH is fully reached. Each year, a quarter of the net profit has to be saved up in the company until the change to a regular GmbH can be made. Good. Now, AG and cooperative we have already seen, I think. There are also juridical persons for non-economic purposes, for example, an EV. That's an association where no minimum capital is needed because this association is not founded for economic purposes, but only for idealistic aims. So if you want to register a chess club or a sports club as a juridical person, you can choose the legal form of an EV. It has to be registered not in the commercial register, but in a special register for EVs, the Vereinsregister. And as it is an association of private persons for private purposes or so, you need several persons, in Germany at least 7 for founding it. You need again statutes which govern or regulate for which purpose the EV is made, who is allowed to act for it as a representative, and so on. Yeah. In the United Kingdom, you will have, or you have similar forms. Forms of partnership will be the general partnership, which is, or partnership, which is the same as the German OHG, or corresponds to GBR, depending on the purpose, and the limited partnership would correspond to what is in German a KG. Then you have forms of juridical persons, especially for business purposes. The limited company or private limited company would be approximately the same as a GmbH in Germany, and the public limited company, PLC, would approximately be the same as a stock corporation or AG. In the USA, you have corporations that would correspond to an Aktiengesellschaft, so an AG. Abbreviation would sometimes be Corp or Inc. for incorporated. And naturally, there are all the other legal forms. We should not go into detail here, but if you are interested in that, try to find that out, make a small list of all the legal forms in the US, and naturally explain to which other forms they correspond. You have many other countries. Any of these countries has its own legal forms, so you should be familiar with them too. Here we have NV, BV, SA, SE, SCE, SPA, KFT, and so on. NV is Dutch, naamloze vennootschap, en dat is de translatie van de Engelse woord, van de French woord Société Anonyme, so that is AG or Aktiengesellschaft. BV is beslotene vennootschap, that means limited company, SA and SE. SA is French, Société Anonyme, because with a stock corporation, you usually don't know the name of the owners. At least the public doesn't know. SE is a European form of, or a European Union law form of the AG. The advantage is that there the rules are equal or mostly equal throughout Europe. So in SE, if you deal with an SE, then everybody knows the legal rules applicable for that. SCE is a cooperative under European Union law. SPA, Società per Azioni, is Italian for AG. KFT is an Hungarian form, I don't know exactly which. And if you want to inform yourself more, read literature and perhaps go to some two simple forms of sources like Wikipedia. There you also find something on these things. Okay. Now, naturally, all these legal forms have legal conditions under which they operate. So for each legal form, the law will decide for which purpose they can be founded and operate, who has the right to take decisions, how flexible the rules are. A GmbH, for example, can be designed in a far more flexible way than an AG with many shareholders who all have very small shares usually, who can be made liable for obligations, for contract obligations of such form. For example, you remember sole trader is responsible for everything. Partners, there it depends. If you are an OHG, a GBR, or a KG, you can be lucky as a limited partner, you can have bad luck as a full partner. Which bureaucracy is necessary? A sole trader is not forced to publish annual balance sheets. A partnership may be. A juridical person is always forced to make balance sheets and publish it. Which taxes have to be paid? Corporations are not liable to income tax, but to corporation tax, there the rates are different. All that plays a role when you want to decide which legal form you regard as the best one for you. And in the long run, it might be that the form which now is best for you might be in the future no longer the best one for you. So also one should have an eye on how can I perhaps later change the legal form I choose now into a different legal form if that becomes more attractive. Yeah, and last question, general partnership has liabilities. Can a bank claim payment from one of the partners? And the answer is yes. A general partnership has only full partners because it's an OHG. So every single partner can be held responsible for all payment obligations or all other obligations incurred by the partnership. So yes, an GmbH has made an employment contract with an employee. Can the employee claim the payment from the director if the director is the only shareholder of the GmbH? And the answer is well, you can always direct your claims against your contract partner. Your contract partner is the GmbH, and under the law, the GmbH is completely a different person than the director. So forget about any claim against the director. You can only claim payment from the property of the GmbH. The director, as representative for the GmbH, will be obliged to make a payment from the property of the GmbH. But if the GmbH is bankrupt, then your claim is directed against the person who owns nothing anymore. So then it's worthless. And the director personally is not responsible. By the way, a GmbH does not have limited responsibility for its obligations. If it's your contract partner, it can be fully made liable for its obligations. The thing is, there is limited, namely no responsibility for the founders of the GmbH, and that's the free. Good. Please memorize at the end at least what a legal or juridical person is, synonyms. What a natural person is, that is the frequent term in Germany, because that's a person which exists by nature. Alternative denominations would be physical person or individual. Partnership, there the people involved are the partners. In a company, you would speak of a shareholder. Keep these two denominations apart, please. Otherwise, you cause confusion. Then, when it comes to distributing the profits or taking them out from the enterprise, using them for private purposes, if you have a partnership or a sole proprietor, dividend payments are not possible. That is just not said. It's called a withdrawal if you take money which you already own as a partner or as a sole trader out of your enterprise and use it for private purposes. Whereas if a company makes a payment of profit to its shareholders, that is called a dividend. And there the money really changes the owner, because before it belongs to the juridical person and afterwards it's property of the shareholders. So a dividend payment is something where the ownership of the money changes, whereas a withdrawal is something where the business property was already before owned fully or in part by the person who later takes the same thing, the money or the assets, into private property. So that should be enough nearly, but at the last moment still some technical terms combined with enterprises. So what is meant by the legal form of an enterprise, so sole proprietorship, partnership, or juridical person, is something you should always know. The head office is something you should find out what that means, or registered office or statutory seat, what that is also something which you should do some research on. And that's what the most frequent terms for juridical persons are, is also something which you should be familiar completely. Now, I thank you very much, and I hope, ladies and gentlemen, that this is